Hi, welcome back to my video course. In this section, we'll be discussing about the immutable rules of Scrum. Now, everything that we have discussed so far are basically the immutable rules of Scrum: the roles, the events, the artifacts, and the interaction between them. It is possible to perform just a part of Scrum and not all of the roles, artifacts, and events, let's say for example. But the total that you get out of this is not really Scrum. Scrum is only whole when it has all of these immutable rules intact. This particular rule is kind of frowned upon by many people, but most of the frameworks actually have immutable rules. Scrum just makes it explicit. It's like a game. Let's say that you have a choice to play basketball or baseball. Once you have chosen which game you have to play, there are some rules that you have to follow, and these cannot be broken. It's the same with Scrum. It's not necessary that you have Scrum implementations only for building products. But if you have selected Scrum, then there are immutable rules which cannot be fiddled with. In this section, we'll look at a few more that were left out. Increments are always done. But what do you mean by done? Done is something that is described by the definition of done in Scrum. And not all the teams may have the same definition of done. It's dependent on the team and sometimes also on the organization. It's a shared understanding in the Scrum team about what a done increment actually means. Especially if you're working with user stories, there might be a confusion between an acceptance criteria and definition of done. Let's try and figure that out. If you're working on a user story which says 1 plus 1 should give you 2, that's an acceptance test. That's something that that particular user story must fulfill. But definition of done is for an increment. So creation of release notes for every increment will go in your definition of done. This is what creates the standard of development in all of the Scrum teams. Now, where will you usually find a definition of done? Well, that's an interesting question. If you're the only Scrum team that is working on a product backlog, and your organization does not describe a standard for a product, this definition of done will be built by your team. When the product basically starts, the first sprint planning meeting is probably a place where you'll start building this definition of done. And then during all the retrospectives, you might actually go and update your definition of done based on whatever you have learned. Now consider that you're working in a scale team. If you have multiple teams working on the same product and the same product backlog, these teams might have a common definition of done that applies to the complete product. If a new team starts in this particular scaled environment, they may have to inherit the existing definition of done and then add more items to it based on their team's exclusive requirements. If your organization provides a standard for products that have to be built, the definition of done might come from the organization itself. At this point of time, you will inherit this definition of done based on your product's exclusive requirements. This is where the definition of done can come from. But when is the definition of done really done? During your first sprint, when you plan the definition of done for the very first time, you may have just a few notable factors that you want to involve. But as your sprints progress, more feedback gets added through your retrospectives, and your definition of done can actually change. So the definition of done of your product is also ever evolving. This ever evolving artifact gives you the standard of the work that every Scrum team has to deliver. Now, if we have a definition of done, one might consider that we have a definition of ready as well. But the Scrum guide does not provide any such artifact. Now, why is that? You see, the definition of done is applicable to an increment. It does not matter what you build, the increment is always one product that is releasable. So there's a standard associated with the increment, which is just one type of product that's going out. But when it comes to the product backlog items, well, the product backlog items does not have just features or just user stories. It has features, enhancements, fixes, even tests. A common definition of ready cannot apply to all of these different types of product backlog items. And that's the reason why we do not have one. So what exactly is ready? Ready is basically any product backlog item that can be completed in one sprint, and it is well understood by the development team. As long as this happens, every item that is pulled into a sprint can be deemed as ready. Product backlog refinement is one of the activities with which more details can be added to the product backlog items, and they can be made ready for a particular sprint. In the next topic, we'll discuss what the product backlog refinement is. Product backlog refinement is the act of adding details, order, and estimates to the product backlog items. Now, although this is usually done by many of the teams as a whole team meeting, it's not really a meeting. It's just an ongoing activity throughout the sprint. It can be done in isolation with just the product owner doing it, or it can be done along with the team. And there is a sentence in the Scrum guide that says that not more than 10% of the capacity of the development team must be utilized during the product backlog refinement. Well, that's just a number just to indicate that you are not taking a lot of time off the development team from doing crucial work of converting product backlog items into done increments. You can have product backlog refinement done at any point of time at the product owner's discretion. During the refinement process, an order is added to every product backlog item. And the higher the items are in the product backlog, they have more details, better estimates, and these are something which may be ready to be pulled into a sprint. That is why we do product backlog refinement. To summarize, everything that we have discussed in this video so far are the immutable rules of Scrum. It's the interaction between the roles, events, artifacts, everyone who's involved in the Scrum team and the development process, including the stakeholders, and also the definition of done, what ready really means, and product backlog refinement. Everything included is what formulates the Scrum framework. In the next section, we'll discuss common anti-patterns of Scrum teams. And in the upcoming sections, we'll also discuss about various organizations of how they have successfully adopted Scrum in order to deliver products.